Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1964B, and today's date is September 8th, 2019, and the title of the episode is Message Marker 1, Alabama, There Are No Coincidences. Now, before I get started, I wanted to talk about protecting yourself. With all the common threats nowadays in America, one of the best things you can invest in for your home protection is a Patriot Brother flashlight. Patriot Brother wants to expend a special 15% Patriot discount to all customers. Never waste money on batteries again. The Patriot Brother X is solar-powered, life-saving emergency strobe light. Charge your phone anywhere, anytime with the USB port. Take advantage now and give you and your family the gift of night protection. Click the link below. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, the deep state and the mainstream media, they're continuing to push the Hurricane Dorian angle about how Trump or someone in the White House changed the map using a marker, and the storm was going to hit Alabama. And they're saying that he doctored the weather forecast. And what's very interesting is that we have two words here, marker and Alabama. And why is the mainstream media continuing with this, and why is Trump continuing with this? Is Trump sending a message? Because we know that Q talked about Alabama and a marker. Think about this for a second. We'll be talking about this a little bit later in this report, but first, the Gateway Pundit uncovered that Felix Sater was mentioned in the Mueller report over 100 times, and he is a deep state spy. Felix Sater is a deep state Democrat with ties to the Clintons and the Mueller gang. He's mentioned over 100 times in the Mueller report, but no one referred to his connections with the deep state. Now damning evidence has been uncovered proving Sater is nothing but a deep state spy. Adam Schiff announced that he had invited Felix Sater to provide the testimony before Congress. Sater eventually did not testify as Schiff and his party realized that Sater's testimony would be detrimental to their Russia collusion sham. A few weeks before Schiff's announcement on Sater, BuzzFeed released another bogus report stating President Trump's attorney Michael Cohen was following President Trump's orders to lie about an unsupported story on Russia. Mueller's team, in an attempt to prevent a leak investigation into its operations, came out 24 hours later and said the story was false. Now we know the entire junk report was provided to BuzzFeed by Clinton and Mueller, Felix Sater. Undercover Huber tweeted out the following. Felix Sater, really? House Dems have scheduled him to testify in public on March 14th, 2019. Prepare for a lot of smoke and mirrors, but it will really be yet another nail in the collusion coffin. Here's Sater's 20-plus year indictment, waived by Weissman. Lynch later signed off as well when she was U.S. Attorney for EDNY. Sater vs. U.S. Intel Asset. Worked for CIA, DIA for over 2 decades, was a source for the FBI for over a decade, is a current FBI source, which even at BuzzFeed admits. And Paul Sperry reported that the individual behind the BuzzFeed fake news story, lying about Trump, was none other than Sater, a deep state individual who is working for the intelligence organizations, who has close ties to the Clintons and Mueller. And we can see how all of this is starting to fall apart. Paul Sperry tweeted out the following. Breaking. BuzzFeed's deep throat source is Felix Sater, the crook-turned-asset informant groomed by Clinton admin and handled by EDNY, Loretta Lynch, and Mueller, attack dog Weissman, and the source E of P-tape for Clinton dossier Mueller using as Russiagate case theory. Now, Sperry was right. Undercover Huber was right. And Sater was seen in pictures with Clinton and mainstream media reporters like Rachel Maddow. And in the Mueller report, Sater is mentioned in the text and footnotes more than 100 times. Not once in the Mueller report does the Mueller gang refer to Sater's connections with the Clintons, Loretta Lynch, or with Andrew Weissman. And we know that the Mueller report was really developed for something completely different. To protect the email scandal, to protect the Uranium One scandal, which Mueller was a part of, to protect all the deep state assets, and to go after Trump for Russian collusion and obstruction. But once again, it didn't work out. This is why we have these bits and pieces in the Mueller report, and this is why a lot of it doesn't even make sense, and this is why Mueller never went down the path to look at Felix Sater, to look at the email scandal, to look at anything. And that's why all the cases today that Mueller said these are Russian operatives and they're the ones who did it, that's why they're all starting to fall apart. Now let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Let's talk about his connections between the deep state players. And they're continually coming out. And we know that thousands and thousands of names are going to be released. Now, what's very interesting is that Mitt Romney has a connection to Robert Maxwell and Jack Lyons. Robert Maxwell and Jack Lyons are two of the most notorious figures in British corporate history. They helped Mitt Romney build his $250 million fortune. Now, Maxwell, who was the owner of Mirror newspapers, invested $2 million in Mitt Romney's first private equity fund. Think about this for a second. Do you think Romney owes him something? Absolutely. Is he part of the deep state? Absolutely. Does he have something to do with Jeffrey Epstein? Most likely. And do you think Romney has some type of connection with Ghislaine Maxwell? Most likely. And then we have Schumer, who received thousands in donation from Jeffrey Epstein. And we mentioned this before, but remember, Senator Chuck Schumer called on Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta to resign and said President Trump should answer for his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that's kind of strange, because Schumer received 7 1,000 donations from Epstein between 92 and 97. This is from the Federal Election Commission records. Epstein also gave $10,000 to Victory in New York, a joint fundraising committee established by Schumer. Epstein also gave an additional $5,000 to Win New York, a Schumer-associated joint committee that benefited the Liberal Party of the New York State. That means that Schumer and Schumer-linked entities received a combined $22,000. And shouldn't we be looking at Schumer instead of Trump? Absolutely. Now, what's very interesting is that new documents show that the MIT Media Lab was aware of Epstein's status as a convicted sex offender, and that Epstein directed contributions to the lab far exceeding the amounts MIT has publicly admitted. The MIT Media Lab, which has been embroiled in a scandal over accepting donations from the financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, had a deeper fundraising relationship with Epstein than it was previously known. And this is coming out from The New Yorker. The New Yorker revealed that although Epstein was listed as a disqualified in MIT's official donor base, the Media Lab continued to accept gifts from him, consulting him about the use of the funds, and by marking his contributions as anonymous, avoided disclosing their full extent, both publicly and within the university. Epstein was credited with securing at least $7.5 million in donations for the lab, including $2 million from Gates and $5.5 million from Black Gifts. The emails described as directed by Epstein or made at his behest. The effort to conceal the lab's contact with Epstein was so widely known that some staff in the office of the lab's director, Joy Ito, referred to Epstein as Voldemort, or he who must not be named. The Media Lab received a $2 million donation from Bill Gates. Ito wrote in an internal email, "This is a $2 million gift from Bill Gates directed by Jeffrey Epstein. For gift responding purposes, we will not be mentioning Jeffrey's name as the impetus for this gift." A mandatory record of the gift filed within the university stated that only Gates is making this gift at the recommendation of a friend who wishes to remain anonymous. Now, an agent for Gates wrote to the leadership of the Media Lab stating that Gates also wished to keep his name out of any public discussion of the donation. This is all tied together. Think about all the information that's coming out right now and how many people are implicated in this. And since this story broke, and this is less than a day after the publication, Joy Ito, the director of the MIT Media Lab, he resigned from his position. And think about this. Think about how many people are involved with Jeffrey Epstein. How many people were being blackmailed? This is why this mystery man came forward and said, listen, don't release this information. It's going to ruin reputations. It doesn't matter if Jeffrey Epstein is dead or not. All these individuals that are involved, this is going to be released to the public. It's all about timing. It all has to match up with what's going to happen with the D-class, with FISA, with spying. They need to combine these two to hit at the reputation and show the criminal acts. This is the perfect storm that's coming. And we can see that there are many individuals who are not sitting by and they're not going to wait for this. They're going to jump ship very early. Think about it. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Hollywood actor, actress. Doesn't make a difference. Most of these people who are screaming and yelling, who are jumping ship, had some type of connection. They're corrupt. The system is corrupt. Many of these individuals we will no longer hear of because they're going to leave their positions. And when you look at just the month of August, you know how many people have already decided that they're going to retire? They're done. And if you just look at the Republican side, 15. Bill Flores, Susan Brooks, Jim Sensenbrenner, Will Hurd, Kenny Marchant, Sean Duffy, John Shimkus, Bob Bishop, Martha Roby, Paul Mitchell, Pete Olson, and there's many others. On the Democrat side, we see 4 Democratic incumbents have announced they will not run in 2020. And this is building. Remember, these individuals that are part of the deep state, some of them believe that they're going to win this fight, so they're sticking it out to the very end. And then we'll see them try to slither away or disappear. Remember, this is the low-hanging fruit here. What Trump and the Patriots are going after, they're going after the source. Now, Trump is continually changing the federal court system. And we need to remember why Trump needs to do this, because the deep state placed their judges in these positions. The deep state judges were not following the rule of law when it came to their cases. They always ruled in the favor of the deep state, and this is why they were put into these positions. We need judges that are going to follow the rule of law. I mean, think about when Obama was in the presidency. Think about Loretta Lynch. Think about Eric Holder. Think about all these Comey and the rest that were there who said, you know, it looks like there's nothing going on with Clinton, so we're just going to skip this. Uranium one, I don't see anything, because they're involved with this kind of stuff. So why would they pursue it if they're involved? If they're corrupt and they're criminals, they're not going to try or pursue or investigate. So Trump right now, he is changing the federal court system. He's placing judges that are going to follow the rule of law. And as he continually does this, the patriots gain strength. Trump tweeted out the following: I want to congratulate Mitch McConnell and all Republicans. Today I signed the 160th federal judge to the bench. Within a short period of time, we will be at over 200 federal judges, including many in the appellate courts and 2 great new U.S. Supreme Court justices. Boom. Who's in control? The patriots. Now, we know the deep state, they've been pushing the idea of gun control, but we know their real mission is to remove weapons from the American people. Their plan is the same plan they've been using since the introduction of the Federal Reserve. And if we go back to that time, we know what they did. Back then, when the Federal Reserve Act was signed, a little while later, they needed the IRS. They needed taxes because we were borrowing from the Federal Reserve and there was interest attached and somebody had to pay for that interest. So they came up with the plan, listen, only the very wealthy are going to pay taxes. Everyone else, no. And of course, what did the people do? They rallied and said, yes, the wealthy should pay the taxes. They're the ones who should pay. couple years later, they said, you know something, the wealthy and the upper middle class should pay the taxes. And the people around the country said, yes, those are the people that should pay the taxes because they have a lot of money. The wealthy and the upper middle class, they're the ones, yes. A little while later, they said, you know something? The middle class, they need to pay the taxes. Of course, at this point, it's too late. At this point, you're saying, well, wait a minute. I thought it was just going to be the wealthy, the upper middle class, those people. Why are we all paying taxes now? But again, it's too late. It was implemented. And then when it got down to the poor people, they couldn't say anything. And then all of a sudden, everyone was paying taxes. Look at gun control. What have they been doing? They've been creating events to scare the people. They demonize guns. They pick one out. Oh, look, let's look at the scariest looking one. It has a flashlight on it. It has ridges on the gun barrel. It's black, and it has this clip thing that can hold a lot of ammunition. Yeah, that's the one we're going to go after. And we're going to use events to scare the people over and over and over. And then we're going to have legislation waiting. And every time we have an event, we push the legislation. Have an event, push the legislation. To build the idea that this scary weapon is to blame. Not the person using it, the scary weapon. And what have they been doing? They're saying, okay, this is the weapon that we want to ban. This is the only weapon. The other ones are fine. Pistols, other rifles, shotguns, no problem. It's only this weapon. You know what's going to happen. Just like with the Federal Reserve, just like everything else. Well, once they have that, they go to the next thing. And during this period, if they get the legislation passed, what happens? They create a database. They do universal background checks. They wait for a time. They repeat it with the next weapon over and over and over. And by the time it's all said and done, they have taken all the weapons. They know where all of them are. And this is only for the law-abiding citizens. Those individuals that get it on the black market, they have no clue who has these weapons. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get rid of the weapons because once the weapons are gone, all those rights that you have, how do you protect them? You can't. And what's very interesting is that they keep telling us that weapons are bad, but in Maine, they passed a law that you didn't need a permit to carry a weapon around. And of course, during this period of time, they said this is going to create chaos, there's going to be killings, there's going to be anarchy, it's going to be like the Wild West, it's going to be awful. Crime's going to go up, it's going to be terrible. But 4 years later, in Maine, U.S. News and World Report says Maine is the safest state in the Union. Think about this for a second. It's the safest state. Residents, they're allowed to carry a concealed firearm without the need for a special permit. Criminals know this. Criminals realize that everyone could have a weapon on them. If everyone has a weapon, do you really want to try to rob them? Do you really want to try to break into their house? Now take, for instance, a city or state that has gun control, where they know they have no weapons. What happens to the people there? Well, the criminals, they know they have the upper hand. They get their weapons on the black market. They know they can even use a knife because the people have no way of protecting themselves. And as you can see, all those individuals that were saying that this is going to be like the Wild West, there's going to be killings, there's going to be crime, well, they were all wrong. Now, out in Hong Kong, we see something very interesting happening. Thousands of Hong Kong protesters chanted the Star-Spangled Banner and called on U.S. President Donald Trump to liberate the city. And they're chanting, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong, resist Beijing, liberate Hong Kong." And it's strange that they're using Trump as the individual that can do this, because people now are seeing what he's doing here in the United States and around the world, very differently than what the mainstream media is reporting. Now, as we know, the Trump administration has been working on a peace deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan. And there was the secret meeting that was scheduled with the Taliban leadership at Camp David. And Trump tweeted out the following. Unbeknownst to almost everyone, the major Taliban leaders and separately the president of Afghanistan were going to secretly meet with me at Camp David on Sunday. They were coming to the United States tonight, unfortunately, in order to build false leverage. They admitted to an attack in Kabul that killed one of our great soldiers and 11 other people. I immediately canceled the meeting and called off peace negotiations. What kind of people would kill so many in order to seemingly strengthen their bargaining position? They didn't. They only made it worse. If they cannot agree to a ceasefire during these very important peace talks and would even kill 12 innocent people, then they probably don't have the power to negotiate a meaningful agreement anyway. How many more decades are they willing to fight? Now, let's break this down. First of all, Trump started out unbeknownst to almost everyone. The major Taliban leaders and separately the president of Afghanistan were going to secretly meet with me at Camp David. Now, we know the president of Afghanistan was placed in there by John Kerry. He helped with the elections. And we know that Trump is saying that this might have been a setup because this was a secret meeting and almost everyone didn't know about it, but the deep state did. So let's break this down a little bit more. The Taliban was working on a peace deal. They were going to meet with Trump to talk about the peace deal, but they had an attack and killed people. Why would they do this? It makes no sense. Think about what the deep state does. They create an enemy. This is their paid mercenary army. Think about Syria. They use Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State to go after Assad. This was their paid mercenary army. Think about Iraq, Libya. They had regime change and put in a puppet ruler. Anyone that opposed that new puppet ruler, they called them terrorists. Al-Qaeda, so they can use force to stop these people. They created a law that said if you're Al-Qaeda, we can drone you. Think about this for a second. Think about Ukraine. When they had regime change in Ukraine, anyone that was against the puppet regime, they were called terrorists. So let's go back to the meeting with Trump. Who was really going to meet with Trump? The legitimate leaders from the Taliban or the paid mercenaries controlled by the deep state, CIA intelligence organizations? Trump and the Patriots, they know who's who. And they knew that the deep state most likely was up to something. Because the true leaders of the Taliban and the Afghanistan government, if they were really working on a peace deal, would they do this? No, they would hold off because they would want the peace deal. The actual leaders of the Taliban, they want the peace deal. But remember, they infiltrate these groups. They bring in others that cause chaos. And I'm talking about the intelligence organizations. This is what they did in Syria. They created this resistance who said, we want Assad out of there. Then they mixed in Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State. First it was Al-Qaeda, then it was the Islamic State, and there was other terrorist groups to build the mercenary army. And then they got caught. And then they said, well, wait a minute, why are you supporting Al-Qaeda there? And they said, oh, no. We're not supporting them. We're just supporting the rebels. That's what we're supporting. And they had to separate them because they got caught. And I'm talking about the intelligence agencies back when Obama was president. And what happened was Obama was calling the shots back then and allowing the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, the rebels to expand their territory because that was their army. The same thing here in Afghanistan. We've been fighting amongst ourselves because the intelligence organizations, they create this terrorist group and they have the U.S. forces fight against it and they fight against them to keep this thing going. This is what they do. Now, out in Iran, we are watching Iran slowly maneuver its way out of this deal that Obama, Kerry made back when they were in office. And, of course, it included other countries. Tehran right now has accused European signatories of failing to abide by their obligations under the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, warning that, listen, if you don't do something, we're just going to get out of this deal. Think about what's happening right now. They're slowly maneuvering out of the deal, blaming it on Europe. And they're going to be walking into the deal with Trump. Remember, optics are very important. I do believe, just like North Korea, there's already a backroom deal. It's already been made. And I do believe what we are watching right now is the show of how Iran is going to get out of the deal. And they're going to continually say, Europe, what are you going to do? Europe, what are you going to do? If you're not going to do anything, guess what? We're going to do this, and we're going to break this part of the deal, and we're going to break this part of the deal. And eventually what's going to happen is they're going to say, listen, Europe didn't hold up to their end of the whole entire deal, so we don't have to abide by the deal. This will allow Iran, and optics looking pretty darn good, to go with the deal with Trump. And we already see it happening. Actually, Iran already came out and said, listen, U.S., if you drop the sanctions, we will deal with you. But we knew this wasn't going to happen. This was part of the show. And eventually, guess what? There will be a deal made. Now, let's talk about what is happening with Trump and the mainstream media over this Sharpie marker that was used and how the hurricane was headed towards Alabama. Both are very interesting. First, Alabama. Let's go back to post 579. Now, this is January 21st, 2018. And Anon put this up. Todd McAleer telling Donna Brazile and John Podesta, and he will be meeting with Soros to pre-program voting machines. So this is an email saying that they're going to pre-program voting machines. Where? It looks like Alabama. Let's go to post 2635. Q gives us a link to Fox News, and this is Democratic operatives create fake Russian bots in Alabama. And what is this all about? This is the D operatives created fake Russian bots designed to link Russia to Roy Moore in the Alabama race. So Trump, with this whole thing, is saying, look at Alabama. Something else is happening there. And then we have post 3231. And Anon, and this is back March 27, 2019, said, ready, sir. Now remember this watch, which said the 19th, and it says 4:50? Don't know if it's AM or PM. And the date says the 19th, and this says marker 1 set Q. Now, what's very interesting about this whole thing is that a Sharpie is a marker. And you can see that the mainstream media is saying that Trump used a marker to alter the hurricane map. And also, the Sharpie has become the first pen-style permanent marker. Marker 1. And once again, we know there is no coincidences. And Trump and the mainstream media, they're battling this out. And to me, every time Trump comes out and says something, Trump wants us to look in a certain direction. Now, is this the marker? We don't know. But we can see that things are starting to fit together. And we'll have to see how this all plays out. Because we know that it was C before D, Coates before the D class. Coates is gone right now. We're heading into the D class section of it. And we already have the Comey report out. They're building the narrative. They're letting the deep state sweat it out. They're feeling the pain. They're going to drip this out. And this is a very slow process. And it's slow on purpose. And Martin Geddes, he tweeted out and kind of explains why the process has to be slow, and also linked to a Q post 738. But let me read the tweet first. The provocation of public arrests is the relatively easy bit. The containment of civil unrest and social upheaval is not. Throw in a complex, dynamic, networked world, and wise people will recognize that slow and gentle is the right thing to do, even if it tests our patience. And then Martin linked to post 738, and then on, this is back in February 11, 2018, said, release prior to cover-up, public informed and collapse. Q, there is one thing that concerns me, somewhat related to this, but more related to 60-40. The less the public knows, the more likely they are to falsely assign blame in the future, possibly even generations from now. It's worth keeping in mind. Q responded, understand one simple fact. The U.S. is connected to the rest of the world. Knowing that, understand by default, if certain intel is released, it would cause worldwide mass suffering. We share the idea of open source, but value life and must make decisions on outcomes and containability. And there's a reason why Trump and the Patriots are moving at a slow pace, because one thing could affect the other. The other reason is that investigations take time. This is not the deep state where they have propaganda all set up. Think about all the false flags. 9/11, the shooting in France where they found IDs, they found the passports, everything linked up very neat and easily after all the events. Those aren't real. That's a movie production. Yes, the disasters were real. Some of them were hoaxes, but those are movie productions. They already mapped and planned that out. This is why you have passports that weren't burnt, destroyed, or anything, and they found them very easily after the buildings came down. This is why you saw tape in France and the car stopped on tape because it was a marker and dropped his ID on the ground. These are productions. These are shows that are going on. This is a movie set. Think about the hack on Sony. That was pre-planned to coordinate and to come out when the movie came out, to build the narrative. It was North Korea. A real investigation takes time, and if you're going to do it right, you need to watch everything and look at different outcomes. And you need to really investigate and gather the evidence to have a slam dunk. And that's what has been happening. We're at the end point now, people. All that work has been done. Here we are. And now they're drip feeding everything out. And the deep state, they're feeling the pain every time this information comes out. And as more information comes out, well, they feel even more pain. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.